Emma's hands shook as she cracked eggs into the skillet, sunlight pouring through her kitchen window, framing the faint outline of Mount Rainier in the distance. For years had passed, 4 years since James had pressed a kiss to her forehead, vowed to return by supper, and vanished into the wild he cherished. The eggs hissed in the pan, but her thoughts drifted, caught in the endless pang of uncertainty. A sudden, piercing phone ring jolted her, the spatula slipping from her grip. The caller ID flashed, Mount Rainier National Park. Her pulse quickened. They hadn't reached out in over 2 years. Mrs. Emma Carter, the ranger's voice was calm yet kind. "I'm Ranger Tom Bennett from Mount Rainier National Park. We need you to visit the station. Hikers discovered a backpack caught in a beaver dam yesterday, and we've linked it to your husband, James, via the GPS tracker's serial number." The words struck her like a blow. She clutched the counter, her knuckles paling. "A backpack after all this time?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you make it to the ranger station? We have questions and the police are already here." Emma's mind churned as she navigated the familiar road to the ranger station, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Each curve stirred memories. This was the route she and James had traveled countless times, James always buzzing with excitement for another trek, always assuring her he'd be cautious. She trusted his expertise, his careful planning. He'd roamed these trails for 3 decades. The ranger station lot held 2 police cruisers beside the usual park trucks. Emma's stomach twisted as she stepped inside, the scent of pine and aged wood stirring more recollections. Ranger Bennett, a sturdy man in his 40s, met her with a compassionate gaze. "Mrs. Carter, thanks for coming. This is Detective Laura Hayes from the county sheriff's office." Detective Hayes, a tall woman with graying hair tied back tightly, offered her hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this. Please take a seat." They guided her to a small meeting room where James's sodden backpack rested on the table, caked in mud and torn at the seams. Emma's breath hitched. She knew it instantly, the gray and blue pack she'd gifted him for his 60th birthday, adorned with the red carabiner he always hooked to the side. The hikers found it wedged in a beaver dam, roughly 8 miles downstream from Spray Falls, Ranger Bennett explained. It was tangled in branches and muck. We traced it using the GPS device's serial number. Detective Hayes opened a file. "Mrs. Carter, we retrieved the memory card from the GPS. The antenna was broken, which is why we couldn't track it during past searches. But the card preserved data from before it was damaged." Emma leaned in, hope and fear clashing within her. "What does it show?" "The data reveals your husband veered off the trail intentionally that day. The final signal came from a remote area, far from any designated path, right about here." The detective tapped a topographic map, her finger resting on an isolated stretch of wilderness. "We searched those coordinates again yesterday and this morning. Found nothing." "But James never strayed from trails," Emma insisted. "He was obsessive about safety. He logged his hiking plans, stuck to marked routes. In 30 years, he never once wandered off his planned path." Detective Hayes's face stayed impassive. "The GPS data is undeniable. He was miles from where he said he'd be. Given this and the remote location, we're considering 2 scenarios, suicide or an accident." "Suicide?" Emma's voice broke. James had just retired. "We were planning a cruise to Alaska, visits to our grandkids in Oregon. He was thrilled about our future together." "I know this is hard," the detective said, her tone softening a touch. "But after 4 years, with wildlife and natural decay, there'd be little evidence left. We won't reopen the case. The search of those coordinates turned up nothing, and honestly, there's nothing more we can do." Emma felt the room shrink around her. "You're just giving up?" "We're not abandoning you, Mrs. Carter. We're being practical. Your husband ventured into a hazardous area. Whether by choice or mistake, the result is the same. The case stays closed." Through her tears, Emma inspected the backpack's contents with Ranger Bennett. James's medical license sat in its plastic sleeve, warped but legible, James Michael Carter, MD. The photo captured his warm eyes behind wire-framed glasses, the soft smile she longed for. His hiking permit dated October 15th. For years prior, the ink faded but readable. His phone, its screen shattered and filled with cloudy water, utterly ruined. The odd part, Ranger Bennett said softly, glancing at the detective who'd stepped out for a call, is where we found it. The Beaver Dam is miles downstream from any marked trail. For the pack to end up there, your husband had to be somewhere far off his planned route. The river's current suggests it traveled a long way. Emma stared at the damaged items, her mind rejecting their implications. James always followed planned paths. He checked weather forecasts obsessively before hikes. He carried spare batteries, emergency gear. His meticulous nature defined him as a doctor. This didn't add up. The ranger's look was kind. Even seasoned hikers can err, Mrs. Carter. Or sometimes people choose not to be found. But Emma knew better. James wouldn't abandon her like that. Not after 40 years of marriage. Not after vowing they'd savor every moment of retirement together. He'd been counting down the days, marking them off on his office calendar with red ink, as eager as a kid before a holiday. As she left the station, clutching a bag with copies of the permits and a receipt for the backpack, they were holding it as evidence, though of what, she wasn't sure. Emma felt more adrift than ever. The official conclusion was firm. James had strayed off trail, meeting either an accident or his own intent. Case closed. But this felt far from resolved. After another pause, a polished woman's voice came on the line. Mrs. Carter, I see Dr. James Carter had meetings with Mr. Thompson in October 4 years ago. How can I assist you? I'm trying to figure out why my husband needed an employment lawyer. He never brought up any problems at work. A brief silence followed. Attorney-client privilege limits what I can disclose even after his passing. But I can confirm Dr. Carter's initial questions were about whistleblower safeguards in the workplace. Emma's throat tightened. Whistleblower safeguards? Yes. He asked about shielding himself from retaliation and the proper way to record evidence of workplace concerns. He had a follow-up booked for October 16th but didn't show. The woman's tone softened. I recall when we learned he'd gone missing. Mr. Thompson was deeply worried. He mentioned Dr. Carter seemed extremely anxious in their last talk, repeatedly asking if his family would be safe if he exposed certain information. Safe from what? I'm sorry, I can't share more, but your husband was cautious, Mrs. Carter. Whatever issue he faced, he wanted to address it legally and responsibly. Emma thanked her and ended the call, her thoughts racing. Whistleblower safeguards, evidence collection, retaliation concerns, and a secret meeting with Dr. William Brooks the morning James vanished, a meeting he'd kept from her. She loaded the key boxes into her car, including the day planner and receipts. Driving home felt dreamlike, her quiet neighborhood unchanged from that morning, yet her world had shifted. James hadn't just gone hiking. He'd met Brooks about something serious enough to need legal advice. As she pulled into her street, Emma spotted the sleek silver BMW in her driveway, Dr. Brooks's car. That custom plate document stood out instantly. Her heart raced as she parked behind it, seeing Brooks by her front door, chatting animatedly with her neighbor, Mrs. Lopez. Mrs. Lopez saw her first, waving warmly. Emma, I was just telling Dr. Brooks you were out. He's been waiting. Brooks turned, his usual charming smile in place, but Emma caught a new tension in his jaw, a stiffness in his posture. He wore his signature tailored suit, but his tie was slightly crooked, odd for the always polished man. Emma, he said kindly, approaching her car. I heard about the backpack. The police called me this morning with some routine questions since I was James's boss. I wanted to see how you're coping with this news. Emma stepped out slowly, hyper-aware of the boxes in her back seat. That's thoughtful, William. It's been a tough day. Mrs. Lopez, always eager for a bit of neighborhood gossip, jumped in. I mentioned to Dr. Brooks you were at your storage unit organizing. I figured, even if it's October. She chuckled at her own remark. Emma saw it then, a fleeting sharpness in Brooks's eyes when Mrs. Lopez mentioned the storage unit. His smile held, but it wavered briefly like a candle flickering in a draft. Storage unit? Brooks asked lightly, though his tone had a subtle bite. Going through old keepsakes? Just some of James's things, Emma replied cautiously. The backpack coming back made me want to feel close to him again. Brooks nodded, his expression sympathetic, but his eyes kept flicking to her car. Naturally. Grief hits us all differently. Find anything noteworthy? Old mementos can sometimes bring comfort or unexpected discoveries. The question felt heavy, laced with an undercurrent Emma couldn't quite pin down. Mrs. Lopez rambled on about her late husband's belongings, oblivious, but Brooks wasn't listening. His gaze locked on Emma with an intensity that set her nerves on edge. Just memories, Emma said. Sorry, William, it's been a long day. Of course. Brooks stepped back, but added, if you need anything, Emma, just call. James meant a lot to me. I'd hate for his memory to be clouded by misconceptions. That word lingered between them, misconceptions. Emma managed a tight smile, nodded, and headed to her door on shaky legs. She felt Brooks's stare following her, sensing him noting the boxes in her car. Inside, with the door locked, she leaned against the wall, exhaling shakily. Brooks showing up right after the police contacted him felt far from coincidental. His curiosity about the storage unit, the way his composure slipped when Mrs. Lopez mentioned it, and that odd comment about James's memory and misconceptions. Through her front window, Emma peeked out. Brooks lingered by his car, not leaving, phone pressed to his ear. His free hand moved sharply as he spoke, a stark contrast to the composed doctor she'd known for 15 years or thought she'd known. The day planner sat in her purse, its entry seared in her mind. Meeting with Brooks, trail parking lot, 7 a.m. What had James uncovered that needed whistleblower protection? What was he planning to discuss with Brooks that morning? And why was Brooks so curious about what she'd found in storage? The doorbell chimed, startling her. Through the peephole, Brooks stood there, his face now a mask of gentle concern. She hesitated, tempted to ignore it, but sensed that would only make him push harder. She cracked the door open. Emma, sorry to bother you again, Brooks said, his voice warm and considerate. I was about to leave when I realized I might have come off brusque. The news about James's backpack has rattled me too. How about coffee? Talking with someone who knew him well can help. Every instinct screamed caution, but Emma saw a chance. If Brooks was tied to whatever troubled James, she might glean something. Coffee could be nice, she said warily. Great. Corner coffee on Main? I recall James saying it was your go-to spot. That works. I'll meet you there in 15. I can drive us, Brooks offered swiftly. No need for 2 cars. I'll drive myself, Emma said firmly. I've got errands after. A flicker crossed Brooks's eyes, but he nodded. Sure. See you there. Emma shut the door and grabbed her phone, texting her sister, Sarah, meeting Dr. Brooks at Corner Coffee on Main. If I don't text in 2 hours, call police. She paused, adding, serious? Sarah replied instantly, what's wrong? You okay? We'll explain later. Just watch the time. The 10-minute drive to Corner Coffee gave Emma time to steady herself. She parked where her car was in view from the window and picked a table in the bustling main area, not the quiet nook Brooks suggested. You remembered, Emma said as Brooks returned with their drinks, a vanilla latte for her. Black coffee for him. James talked about you all the time, Brooks said, settling in. Vanilla lattes, early morning hikes, your grandson's baseball games. He adored you. The words should have warmed her, but Brooks's tone felt like a test, probing her guard. Emma sipped her latte and stayed silent. This must be overwhelming, Brooks went on. For years of uncertainty and now this find. Have you had a chance to absorb it? I'm getting by, Emma said cautiously. Brooks leaned in, his face kind. Going through James's stuff must stir up a lot. All those memories tucked away. Did you find much in storage? Sometimes people keep things their spouses never knew about. Work papers, maybe. There it was. Emma kept her expression even. Mostly journals and patient thank you notes. James kept every kid's drawing he got. So like him. Brooks smiled, but his fingers began tapping the table rhythmically. No work documents? He was always so thorough with records. I bet he kept copies of key files. Just the usual, Emma said vaguely. Why the interest? Oh, no big reason. When the police called this morning, they asked if James ever took patient files home, HIPAA concerns, you know. I told them he'd never do that, but I wanted to check for his legacy's sake. Emma noticed a faint sweat on Brooks's brow despite the shop's cool air. The police asked about patient files? Routine, I'm sure. Brooks's tapping sped up. They also asked about his mindset those last weeks. I shared what I saw, naturally. Did you find any personal notes, diaries? People facing big changes sometimes jot things down. James wasn't big on diaries, Emma said, noting Brooks's jaw tense slightly. No? What about planners? He always had that leather one. Brooks's casual tone was slipping, an edge creeping in. Emma made a choice. I did find his planner, actually. Brooks's fingers froze. It was fascinating to see his last week. All those final appointments closing out his practice. She paused, studying Brooks's face. One entry on October 15th puzzled me. October 15th. Brooks's voice stayed even, but his grip on his coffee mug tightened, knuckles paling. He noted, meeting with Brooks, trail parking lot, 7 a.m. But he told me he was hiking solo that morning. Brooks's face changed in an instant, the caring facade crumbling into something cold and calculating, laced with barely contained alarm. Oh, that, he said, his laugh strained and empty. Per James? He was so off that morning. Actually, he called me around 6:30, sounding frantic. He was stressed about his mental health, said retirement was hitting him hard. I tried to dissuade him from hiking, suggested we meet to talk it over, but he insisted he needed the mountain to clear his head. Emma stared at him. This man she'd known for 15 years, spinning lies with ease. James called you? Yes, early. My wife, Lisa, can vouch, the phone woke us. He was rambling about pressure, things he couldn't manage. I offered to meet, but he got almost paranoid, said he needed to think. Brooks leaned closer, his tone conspiratorial. Emma, I didn't want to upset you, but James showed signs of depression for weeks. Retirement was crushing him. Depression? Emma's voice sharpened with disbelief. James was thrilled about retirement. He had trips planned, maps ready. People often hide their struggles, even from loved ones, Brooks cut in smoothly. As a doctor, he'd know how to cover it up. That mix-up about our meeting, noting it when it was just a call, that's common in someone under intense stress. But Emma knew better. She'd seen the planner entry. James's handwriting was steady, deliberate as always. No signs of distress, no shaky script. And James never lied to her, not once in 40 years. If he'd spoken to Brooks that morning, he'd have told her. I need to go, Emma said, standing abruptly. Brooks rose too fast, his coffee mug clinking against the saucer. Emma, hold on. If you found anything else, papers that could be misread, I hope you'll tell me. For James's sake, James's reputation is fine, Emma said icily. Excuse me. She walked out steadily but felt Brooks's gaze drilling into her. In the window's reflection, she saw him frozen by their table, his coffee mug shaking in his hand. The man who'd given James's eulogy, lauded his honor, vowed to support her grief. That man was gone. In his place was a stranger, his flimsy story about James's mental state so clearly false it turned her stomach. James wasn't depressed. He wasn't confused. He'd had a meeting with Brooks that morning, and Brooks was desperate to conceal why. Emma's hands trembled as she slipped into the restroom. The coffee shop's normalcy, steaming espresso, customer chatter, felt jarring against her pounding heart. She locked herself in the farthest stall and dialed 911, fingers unsteady. 911, what's your emergency? Emma whispered. I'm at Corner Coffee on Main Street. I'm with someone who might be dangerous. Please send help. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I'm not sure. Possibly. His name's Dr. William Brooks. He's asking about my late husband and acting strange. I'm scared. We'll dispatch a unit to check on you. Can you stay safe where you are? I have to go back out or he'll suspect something. Please hurry. Emma hung up, took deep breaths to calm herself, splashed cold water on her face, and rehearsed a neutral look in the mirror. She stepped back out, heart sinking at the sight. Brooks had slid into her side of the booth, blocking her way out. His coffee sat untouched across the table. "There you are," he said, his smile cold, eyes unblinking. "I was getting concerned." Emma forced herself to slide into the booth, her back pressed against the wall. "Sorry, I'm just a bit shaken by everything today." "Completely understandable." Brooks's tone had hardened, the fake warmth giving way to something colder. "You know, I swung by your place this morning on my way to the clinic around 6 o'clock. Saw some boxes by your curb. Tidying up in October?" Emma's mouth went dry. There were no boxes by her curb. "I didn't. Don't lie to me, Emma." His words sliced through the coffee shop's hum, sharp and biting. "I saw you loading boxes at the storage unit. Mrs. Lopez was quite talkative about your errands." "I need to go," Emma said, trying to edge past him. Brooks didn't move. "What did you find?" "Nothing. Just keepsakes, like I told you." Her voice pitched higher than she meant. "James kept records of everything, didn't he? Always so meticulous, so holier than thou." The last words hissed out. Emma pushed against him. "I have to leave. My sister's waiting for me." For a moment, Brooks stayed still, then slowly rose. "Fine. I'll walk you to your car." It wasn't an offer. His hand clamped her elbow, steering her firmly toward the door. Emma's eyes darted around the coffee shop, desperate for a glance to catch, but everyone was lost in their own chatter, their own worlds. The crisp October air hit her as they stepped outside, bringing a sharper wave of fear. The parking lot was nearly empty, her car in the far corner where she'd thought it'd be seen from inside. Now it felt impossibly far. "Where are they?" Brooks's voice dropped all pretense of kindness. "Where or what?" His grip dug into her arm. "The documents, the records, whatever James kept. I know he made copies." "I don't know what you mean." Brooks spun her, pinning her against her car. "Don't act clueless." James was set to ruin everything with his sanctimonious crusade. 40 years building a practice, creating jobs, saving lives, and he wanted to torch it over some numbers in a ledger. "William, you're hurting me." "Where are the files?" He shook her, his face inches away. "Did you give them to the cops?" "The FBI? Who else knows?" Emma tried to wrench free, but Brooks was stronger than his polished demeanor suggested. "Let me go. People saw us leave together. If anything happens," then she saw the gun. Brooks drew it from his jacket in one fluid motion, pressing it against her side. The metal chilled her through her sweater. "Get in my car, Emma. Now." He shoved her toward his BMW, the gun concealed between them but undeniable. "Move." Emma's legs wobbled. "You don't have to do this." "Whatever happened with James, quiet." Brooks yanked open the passenger door, using his body to hide the weapon. "Get in, or I shoot you right here." Emma scanned the lot frantically. The coffee shop windows gleamed with afternoon sun, impossible to see through. A man passed by, engrossed in his phone. No help was coming. "Please," she whispered as Brooks forced her into the seat. "I have grandkids. You should have thought of that before you started snooping." He slammed the door and strode to the driver's side. The gun now aimed at her across the console. "Hands where I can see them." Emma's trembling hands rested in her lap as Brooks started the car and peeled out of the lot. He drove one-handed, the gun steady. "You should have stayed out of it," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Should have just believed James took his own life like everyone else did. For years of quiet, Emma, and you had to wreck it. You killed him." Her voice was barely audible, but Brooks caught it. "James killed himself the second he decided to play hero. Do you know how many people relied on my practice? Not just staff, their kids, their college savings, their homes. One self-righteous doctor was going to ruin dozens of lives." Tears spilled down Emma's face as Brooks sped up, the town's familiar streets fading into suburban sprawl, then rural roads toward Mount Rainier. "He found something, didn't he?" she said through sobs. "In the billing." Brooks's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Something. Such a tidy word." James couldn't grasp that you bend the system to keep a practice alive. Insurers deny valid claims while their CEOs rake in millions. I was just balancing the scales. By committing fraud? By surviving. His grip tightened on the wheel. But St. James saw only right and wrong. He was going to report me, dismantle everything I'd built, send me to jail. For what? For ensuring my people could pay their bills. The forest thickened as they drove, sunlight dappling through the trees. Emma knew this route. It led to the Sunrise Visitor Center, the path James took that October morning. Where are you taking me? Where else? Brooks veered onto a dirt track, the BMW jolting over roots. Your husband loved his hikes, said the mountain, cleared his mind. Let's see if it works for you. 20 minutes of tense silence followed, broken only by Emma's quiet prayers and the crunch of gravel. At last, Brooks stopped in a small clearing and killed the engine. Get out. Emma's legs buckled as she stood. The forest was serene, birdsong echoing faintly. It felt unreal that she might die in such a tranquil place. Walk. Brooks waved the gun toward a narrow path into the woods. We're taking a little hike, just like James. They'll find you, Emma said, her voice steadier than she expected. The police know I was with you. My sister knows. Your sister knows you met an old friend for coffee. The cops will find your car at the shop and think you went for a walk to grieve. Loss makes people do odd things. Sometimes they chase their loved ones. He prodded her onto the trail, the gun pressed against her spine. The trees closed in, the light dimming under the canopy. Keep going, Brooks ordered. The uneven ground, littered with branches and roots, tripped at Emma's feet. Brooks pushed her forward, the gun's barrel a constant threat. Her breath came in sharp gasps, fear and exertion blending. Move, he barked, his own breathing labored. Don't even think about bolting. You wouldn't get far. Emma stumbled over a gnarled root, steadying herself against a mossy tree. The rough bark grounded her, making the nightmare feel horribly real. How often had James touched these trees, walked these paths? They'd gone maybe 50 yards when a distant siren pierced the air. Brooks froze, his head snapping around. No, he muttered. No, no, no. More sirens joined, growing louder, closer. Hope flared in Emma, only to falter as Brooks's hand seized her arm. You called them. His voice was flat, stunned. At the coffee shop, you called the police. The sirens wailed, multiple vehicles now, their red and blue lights flashing through the trees. Damn it. Brooks yanked her against him, spinning her to face the clearing. His arm locked around her neck, the gun now at her temple. This wasn't supposed to happen. Car doors slammed, voices shouted orders, and brush rustled as officers moved in. Dr. Brooks. A familiar voice blared through a megaphone, Detective Hayes from that morning. This is the police. The area's surrounded. Release Mrs. Carter and come out with your hands up. Brooks backed against a massive fir, using it for cover while keeping Emma as a shield. She felt him shaking, his arm tightening around her throat. Stay back, he yelled. Everyone back off or I'll shoot her. I mean it. Dr. Brooks. No one has to get hurt. Detective Hayes's voice carried firmly. Let's talk this out. Let Emma go, and we can find a solution. There's no solution, Brooks's voice broke. You don't get it. James was going to ruin everything. Everything I built. Emma glimpsed officers positioning behind trees, weapons drawn but lowered. A younger officer in tactical gear crept closer from the left, using bushes for cover. Stay back. Brooks swung the gun toward the movement, then back to Emma's head. I'm not kidding. Everyone freeze. The standoff dragged on, minutes stretching like hours. Sweat dripped from Brooks's face onto Emma's neck. His whole body trembled, the gun wavering against her temple. This wasn't the plan, he muttered repeatedly. James should have taken the money. I offered him plenty, you know? Enough for trips, a cushy retirement. But no, he had to be noble. had to play the saint. Dr. Brooks, a new voice called, calm and steady. I'm Officer Mark Rivera, a negotiator. Can we talk? Help me understand what went down. What went down? Brooks's laugh was raw. One self-righteous doctor decided he was above us all. 15 years of friendship meant nothing. Nothing. Emma felt Brooks's grip shift, his agitation spiking. The gun moved from her temple to gesture at the police, then back. His movements grew jerky, unstable. He had proof, Brooks rambled. Copies of everything. Bills, records, deposits, so thorough, like always. Said he'd go to the FBI that afternoon if I didn't confess. Officer Rivera edged forward, hands empty and raised. Let's discuss this, doctor. I'm sure we can. Don't come closer. Brooks's shout was near hysterical. Panic had consumed him. Emma felt his heart pounding against her back, his breaths ragged. Rivera took another step. It was too much. Brooks let out a choked sound, half sob, half growl, and swung the gun down hard against Emma's head. Pain erupted, stars bursting across her vision. She cried out, her legs giving way, and collapsed. As she fell, Brooks's shield vanished. He stared at her crumpled form, then at the tightening circle of officers, and made a reckless choice. He bolted, crashing through the brush deeper into the woods. He got maybe 20 feet. 2 officers in tactical gear sprang from hiding, tackling him from both sides. They hit the ground in a flurry of limbs, Brooks thrashing wildly but outmatched. Within seconds, they had him pinned in the dirt, wrists cuffed behind him. Stop fighting, one officer ordered. But Brooks kept raging. You don't understand. James ruined everything, my practice, my name, my life. He threw it all away with his sanctimony. 40 years of work, gone because one man couldn't stay out of it. Emma clutched her bleeding head, the world spinning as EMTs reached her. She heard Brooks still yelling as they dragged him up, dirt and pine needles clinging to his pristine suit. He wouldn't listen, he screamed. I begged him, offered him everything, but he had to be the hero, had to save the day. Where did it get him? The EMTs were calm and efficient, checking Emma's eyes and pressing gauze to her scalp wound. You'll be fine, one reassured her. Just a bad cut. We'll get you to the hospital for a full check. Through pain and tears, Emma watched them haul Brooks away, still ranting about James, money, and ruin. The polished doctor she'd known for 15 years was gone, replaced by a frantic stranger, caked in forest grime, hurling blame at a dead man. Detective Hayes crouched beside her as the EMTs worked. You did well, Mrs. Carter. That 911 call saved you. Emma nodded faintly, wincing at the pain. The forest buzzed with activity, officers, crackling radios, evidence markers. The quiet trail was now a crime scene. But Emma was alive. Unlike James, she'd leave these woods. The thought brought fresh tears, but also a fierce resolve. Brooks had failed. Whatever truths James died for, Brooks's efforts to bury them had collapsed. Justice, delayed 4 years, was finally here. The police station's harsh fluorescent lights worsened Emma's headache, but she refused hospital care until she'd given her statement. A butterfly bandage held her scalp wound shut, the EMTs assuring her stitches weren't needed. Detective Hayes sat across from her, a recorder between them as a young officer jotted notes. Take your time, Mrs. Carter, Hayes said kindly. Start wherever feels right. Emma recounted the morning's backpack discovery, Lisa's insights at the clinic, the storage unit finds, and Brooks's escalating strangeness. Her voice wavered as she described the gun, the drive into the forest, the certainty she'd die where James had. He kept saying James should have taken the money, Emma said. That James was going to destroy everything. Hayes nodded. Dr. Brooks is in interrogation room too. Need a break? No. I need to know what happened to my husband. A knock interrupted. Another detective leaned in, murmuring to Hayes, who raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Carter, Hayes said cautiously, Brooks's story is unraveling fast with the planner evidence and your statement. He's talking a lot. Emma's hands tightened in her lap. What's he saying? I'll get the latest. Officer Patel will stay with you. Hayes returned 15 minutes later, her face grim, carrying a thick file. Brooks cracked completely, she said, sitting down. He's confessed to James's murder. The word struck Emma like a blow. Murder. Not lost, not suicide, not an accident. Murder. Hayes opened the file. Brooks says he and two accomplices, guys from his practice who handled under-the-table tasks, met James at the trailhead that morning. They claimed they wanted to settle their disagreement, work it out quietly. James trusted them enough to listen, though he was cautious. Brooks convinced him to talk away from prying ears. They trailed him up the path for an hour, far from anyone. Emma shut her eyes, imagining James hiking with those men, likely still hoping for a fair resolution. He always saw the good in people. They stopped at a secluded lookout, Hayes went on. Brooks made a final offer to buy James's silence. When James refused and said he'd go to the FBI that afternoon, Brooks claims one of his men pushed James. But given Brooks's lies, we think he gave the order or did it himself. How? Emma's voice was a whisper. It was a 200-foot fall onto rocks. Death was instant. Hayes's tone softened. He didn't suffer, Mrs. Carter. Emma nodded, speechless. Hayes paused, then continued. Brooks and his men staged it to look like James wandered off trail. They broke the GPS to avoid tracking, tossed the backpack in the river, thinking it'd never surface. But why? Emma finally choked out. What was worth killing for? Hayes pulled out a document. It's messy. Brooks admitted to years of insurance fraud, billing for fake procedures, sometimes on patients long deceased. Records were doctored to show treatments that never happened. Lisa said he wouldn't let anyone help with patient transitions, Emma said slowly. He took all the files home. He was hiding his tracks. But there's more. Hayes's face darkened. Brooks was also running an illegal organ trade. He took black market cash for transplants, using his legitimate practice as a cover. He had ties to a nationwide corruption network. Emma felt nauseated. The man who'd eulogized James, praised his honor, had built a criminal empire behind a healer's mask. James spotted inconsistencies in his last weeks, Hayes explained. Brooks got careless, or James was just that diligent. Mismatched financials, patient files, odd deposits. James started digging quietly, collecting evidence. The lawyer, Emma said suddenly. He was asking about whistleblower protections. He was preparing a case. Brooks found out, won't say how, and tried to buy him off. When that didn't work, he turned to threats. James stood firm. An officer knocked, speaking softly to Hayes. Emma watched Hayes's expression shift, blending satisfaction and sorrow. Mrs. Carter, Hayes said gently, based on Brooks's confession about the exact spot, we sent a chopper to the cliff. They found remains. Emma's vision swam with tears. For years of uncertainty. The remains are caught in a rocky ravine. Teams are working to recover them. I have to warn you, after 4 years of weather and animals, identification will need DNA and much is gone. Emma nodded, tears streaming. But I can bury him. I can give him a real funeral. Yes, Hayes said softly. You can. Emma wiped her eyes. What about Brooks's accomplices? He's giving names, angling for a deal. 2 maintenance guys from his practice did his dirty jobs. We're arresting them now. The FBI is stepping in due to the organ trafficking's interstate scope. This is huge, Mrs. Carter. Your husband uncovered something far bigger than one crooked doctor. Emma thought of James's final week, the trembling hands Lisa noticed, the secret lawyer meetings, the burden he carried alone. He'd known Brooks was dangerous but felt driven to stop him. He'd shielded her by keeping her in the dark. He knew they might kill him, Emma said quietly. That's why he hid the meeting. To protect me. Your husband was courageous, Hayes said. He could have taken the money, ignored it. Instead, he chose what was right. That was James, Emma whispered. It's who he was. Later, as Emma signed her statement, she reflected on the two men she'd lost that day, the husband who died 4 years ago fighting a monster, and the friend she thought she'd known. Brooks had shared their dinners, laughed at James's stories, played the esteemed doctor while running a syndicate that ruined lives. But James had seen through the facade. Knowing the risk, he'd stood against corruption. He'd gathered evidence, met with lawyers, prepared to expose Brooks legally. He'd died on the mountain he loved, betrayed by men he trusted. But his integrity remained untouched. Emma left the station as the sun dipped low, casting Mount Rainier in hues of rose and amber. Somewhere on that peak, teams were bringing James home. The uncertainty was over. The truth was out. Her tears flowed anew, but woven with the grief was pride. James had died a hero, even if only she would know. He'd given his life to stop a hidden evil cloaked in a healer's guise. She drove home slowly, already envisioning the funeral. James deserved a true burial with full honors, his bravery finally revealed. Brooks would face justice. His accomplices would be caught. The network would crumble. And James would rest in peace, his last fight won.